May 12, 2:47 a.m., East Dalian, China. Park Jin Hyok stared at his laptop screen in room 413 of the Jiangguo Hotel. His hands were shaking, not from fear, from exhaustion. 5 days with maybe 8 hours of sleep total. The code was finally ready. The monster was complete. He had found it 3 hours ago, EternalBlue, the NSA exploit that security researchers had reverse engineered and posted online just weeks earlier. The missing piece. The thing that would make his ransomware unstoppable. Not just another phishing campaign that relied on human error. This would spread itself. Autonomously. Relentlessly. Park wasn't supposed to understand what he was building. He was just following orders. Lazarus Group didn't explain missions to its programmers. They gave you specifications, deadlines, and consequences for failure. But Park wasn't stupid. He knew this was different. Bigger. More dangerous than the Sony hack or even the Bangladesh bank job. His encrypted phone buzzed. One message. Status? Park typed back. Complete. Ready for testing. The response came instantly. No testing. Deploy now. His stomach dropped. They always tested. Always run simulations first. What was the rush? He tried to argue. Fail-safe not verified. Payment infrastructure incomplete. Recommend a 48-hour. Deploy. Now. Park's finger hovered over the enter key. The code would upload to their command servers, get packaged into the final payload, and launch within hours. Once deployed, there was no recall. No undo button. The worm would replicate until someone found the failsafe hidden in his code. A domain name he'd hard-coded as a safety mechanism his superiors didn't even know about. He pressed enter. The upload bar filled slowly. Park watched the numbers climb. 23%, 47%, 68%, 91%. Complete. He exhaled and closed his laptop. His orders were to stay in the hotel until the operation concluded. He fell asleep within minutes, still wearing his clothes. When he woke up 6 hours later, his laptop was gone. Park searched the room frantically. Closet, bathroom, under the bed. Nothing. His encrypted phone sat on the nightstand with a new message. Thank you for your work. The monster has been released. He turned on the television. BBC World News was already running breaking coverage.
Breaking news tonight as the NHS and major corporations around the world have been hit by a massive cyber attack identified as WannaCry.
Park felt his legs weaken. He sat on the edge of the bed and watched the world burn. But this story doesn't start in a Chinese hotel room. It starts decades earlier, on the Korean peninsula, where a divided nation would eventually turn to crime to survive. 1950. The Korean War. When the armistice was signed in 1953, North Korea was left isolated, impoverished, and desperate. While South Korea rebuilt with American aid, the North turned inward under Kim Il-sung's totalitarian regime. By the 1970s, Pyongyang was printing counterfeit US $100 bills so sophisticated that even the Secret Service struggled to detect them. They called them supernotes. But counterfeiting had limitations. Paper money could be traced, seized, and intercepted. By the early 2000s, North Korea realized something crucial. The internet was the perfect crime scene. Borderless, anonymous, instantaneous. In 2009, the regime established Bureau 121, a military intelligence division dedicated entirely to cyber warfare. It recruited the country's brightest computer science students from Kim Il-sung University and sent them abroad to operate under false identities. China was the preferred base. Far enough from Pyongyang to provide cover, close enough to maintain control. They called themselves Lazarus Group. 2012. Chosun Expo, Dalian, China. Park Jin Hyok was 27 when he was assigned to Lazarus. He hadn't volunteered, nobody volunteered. One morning, 2 military officers appeared at his university dorm and told him to pack. 3 days later, he was in China with a new identity, a new job title, that software developer for Chosun Expo, a fake tech company, and very specific instructions. His first assignment was reconnaissance. Learn how international banking systems worked, study SWIFT protocols, map vulnerabilities in corporate networks. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't even particularly political. He was just good with code, and that made him useful. The work was tedious at first. Phishing emails, network scans, data collection. Park spent 18 months learning Western corporate infrastructure, understanding how security systems worked, finding the weak points. He lived in a small apartment near the coast, rarely spoke to anyone outside the team, and sent encrypted reports back to Pyongyang every week. His handlers were careful. They rotated assignments frequently so no single programmer understood the full scope of any operation. Park would write one module, another programmer would write the next, and a third would integrate them. Compartmentalization protected the organization. It also kept programmers like Park from asking too many questions. December 2014. Sony Pictures Entertainment. Lazarus's first major operation happened because of a movie. The Interview, a Seth Rogen comedy about assassinating Kim Jong-un, had North Korea furious. The order came down: humiliate Sony, destroy them publicly. Park was part of the team that infiltrated Sony's network using Spear, phishing emails disguised as Apple ID verifications. Once inside, they spent weeks mapping the system, locating backup servers, identifying key executives. Then they wiped everything. Unreleased films leaked online. Internal emails exposed Hollywood's ugliest secrets, racist jokes, salary negotiations, brutal executive gossip. Sony's entire digital infrastructure collapsed. Employees found their computers displaying a red skeleton and a message, "Hacked by Guardians of Peace." The FBI eventually traced the attack back to North Korea. The Obama administration imposed sanctions, but Sony never fully recovered. The hack cost them over $100 million in damages and repairs. And Lazarus learned an important lesson. Embarrassment was powerful, but money was better. Park didn't know if his code had been used in the final attack. He never knew. The handlers didn't provide feedback or updates. You completed your assignment, submitted your work, and waited for the next order. Sometimes weeks passed in silence. Sometimes orders came at 3 in the morning. February 2016. Bangladesh bank heist. Park's second major operation was more ambitious. Lazarus had figured out how to manipulate SWIFT, the international banking communication system, to send fraudulent transfer requests. The target? Bangladesh bank's account at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. The goal? Steal $1 billion. Park wrote the malware that infiltrated Bangladesh bank's systems. It was elegant, sophisticated, designed to cover its tracks by deleting evidence and manipulating printer logs so bank employees wouldn't notice the fraudulent transactions. On February 4th, 2016, 35 transfer requests, totaling $951 million, were sent from Bangladesh Bank's SWIFT terminal. Most were blocked or flagged, but 5 went through, totaling $101 million. Of that, $81 million vanished into Philippine casinos before anyone realized what had happened. It was the largest digital bank heist in history, and it almost worked perfectly. The mistake? A single typo. One transfer was addressed to the Shalika Foundation, but the malware accidentally spelled it Shalika Foundation. That tiny error triggered a manual review that caught the whole scheme. Still, $81 million was gone. Disappeared into the Philippines' underground economy. Laundered through casinos where regulations were loose and questions were rare. The FBI tracked some of it to junket operators and high-stakes gambling rooms, but recovering the money proved impossible. Park read about the heist in international news reports. He recognized pieces of his code in the technical analyses published by security firms. But again, nobody told him if his work had been used. Nobody congratulated him or criticized him. The operation simply ended, and he waited for the next assignment. April 2017. The Shadow Brokers. In August 2016, a mysterious hacker group called the Shadow Brokers announced they had stolen cyber weapons from the NSA's Equation Group, America's most elite hackers. They tried to auction them off, but nobody bought. So, in April 2017, they leaked everything for free. Among the leaked tools was EternalBlue, an exploit that targeted a vulnerability in Windows Server Message Block Protocol. It allowed remote code execution on any unpatched Windows machine. The NSA had known about this vulnerability since 2012, and kept it secret, using it for espionage. Microsoft released an emergency patch in March 2017, 2 months before the leak, but millions of systems worldwide remained unpatched. Hospitals still running Windows XP, government agencies running outdated software, small businesses that couldn't afford IT departments. Security researchers immediately understood the danger. Some even published guides explaining how EternalBlue worked, hoping to raise awareness. Instead, they handed Lazarus the blueprint for the perfect weapon. May 2017, Room 413. Park's new assignment was straightforward: build ransomware that could spread automatically. Traditional ransomware required victims to click malicious links or open infected attachments. This needed to be different, autonomous, unstoppable. He had been working on it for 3 months when EternalBlue was leaked. Suddenly, the mission became possible. Park integrated the exploit into his ransomware, creating a worm that could scan networks, find vulnerable machines, infect them, and replicate, all without human interaction. He called it WannaCry. The ransomware was crude. It encrypted files and demanded $300 in Bitcoin. The payment system was barely functional. There was no automated way to decrypt files, even if victims paid. The ransom message was poorly translated into 28 languages, full of grammatical errors. But none of that mattered, because Park had embedded EternalBlue into the code, and that made WannaCry the most dangerous malware ever created. There was one safety mechanism. Park had hard-coded an unregistered domain name into the worm, a failsafe. If that domain was ever registered and became active, WannaCry would stop spreading. It was his insurance policy, a way to stop the monster if things went wrong. He'd learned this technique from analyzing other malware samples. Some programmers used failsafe as anti-analysis tools. If the malware detected a sandbox environment, it would check for impossible domains and shut down. Park adapted the concept as a genuine safety measure, but he never got to test it. On May 11th, his handlers sent the deployment order. No testing phase, no gradual rollout, just immediate global release. Park argued. He sent 3 messages explaining the risks. The failsafe was untested. The payment infrastructure couldn't handle large-scale deployment. The worm might spread too fast to control. The response was always the same: deploy now. May 12, 2017, 7:44 a.m., GMT, England. The first infections appeared in Spain, hitting Telefónica's internal systems. Then Portugal. Then Russia. Within 90 minutes, WannaCry had spread to 74 countries. At 8:03 a.m., the United Kingdom's National Health Service began reporting system failures. Hospitals across England couldn't access patient records. Ambulances were diverted from emergency rooms. Doctors and nurses reverted to paper charts and handwritten notes. Surgeries were cancelled. Patients in critical condition were turned away. By 10 o'clock a.m., the situation was catastrophic. 48 NHS trusts were infected. 16 organizations had to completely shut down their IT systems. Radiology departments couldn't view X-rays. Blood banks couldn't match donors. Pharmacies couldn't dispense medications. People were dying because of code. WannaCry wasn't targeting hospitals specifically. It was indiscriminate. It hit car factories in France, railway systems in Germany, universities in China, gas stations in the United States. FedEx, Nissan, Renault, Deutsche Bahn, and all infected. But it was the hospitals that made headlines. The images of ambulances being turned away. The stories of cancer patients unable to receive chemotherapy. The NHS, one of the world's most respected healthcare systems, brought to its knees by ransomware. In Spain, Telefónica employees arrived at work to find their computers locked. In Russia, the Interior Ministry's network went down. In China, university students couldn't access their thesis files. In India, police stations lost years of case records. The ransom screen appeared in 28 languages. Oops, your files have been encrypted. It demanded $300 in Bitcoin, with the price doubling after 3 days and files permanently deleted after 7. But paying didn't help. The payment system was so poorly designed that even victims who paid couldn't reliably decrypt their files. There was no customer support, no decryption keys, no way to verify payments. The ransom was almost irrelevant. The real damage was the chaos. 2:30 p.m. GMT, Devon, England. Marcus Hutchins was a 22-year-old cybersecurity researcher who had been tracking malware from his parents' house when he noticed something strange about WannaCry. The code kept trying to connect to a specific domain. The domain didn't exist yet. Hutchins thought it might be a command and control server, so he registered it for $10.69, hoping to monitor the malware's behavior and gather data. The moment the domain went live, something unexpected happened. WannaCry stopped spreading. Hutchins had accidentally activated the failsafe. Park's safety mechanism, the one he'd never tested, had worked perfectly. Every new copy of WannaCry checked if that domain existed. If it did, the worm deactivated itself. By 3:03 p.m., the outbreak had stopped. Not because anyone defeated the malware, but because a researcher in England accidentally triggered a failsafe that a programmer in China had embedded as a failsafe. But the damage was done. Over 200,000 computers in 150 countries had been infected. The economic impact would eventually reach $4 billion. Hospitals remained crippled for days. Businesses lost weeks of work. Individuals lost irreplaceable files. May 13, 2017, room 413. Park watched the news coverage in silence. His phone stayed dark. No messages. No new orders. Lazarus had gone silent. He understood why. WannaCry was supposed to be a precision weapon, something they could deploy strategically against specific targets. Instead, it had become a global catastrophe. The kind of attack that drew immediate international attention. The kind of attack that governments couldn't ignore. Park had built exactly what they asked for, but he'd also built something nobody could control. He stayed in the hotel for 3 more days, waiting for instructions. Finally, a message arrived. Return to position. Await orders. Park packed his laptop and took a taxi back to his apartment. He deleted his browser history, wiped his hard drives, and waited. Weeks passed. Then months. No new assignments. No contact beyond routine check-ins. He wasn't sure if he was being protected or forgotten. Fall 2017, Washington, D.C. The investigation moved quickly. Security researchers analyzed WannaCry's code and found fragments of Korean language comments. They discovered infrastructure overlaps with previous Lazarus attacks, reused IP addresses, similar malware compilers, identical server configurations. Symantec's security team found code similarities between WannaCry and the tools used in the Sony hack. Kaspersky Lab traced command and control servers back to infrastructure used in the Bangladesh bank heist. The digital forensics were overwhelming. The National Security Agency, FBI, and Department of Homeland Security pooled resources. They traced command and control servers to Chosun Expo in Dalian. They found email addresses linked to multiple operations. They cross-referenced login times, IP addresses, and server locations. And they found a name, Park Jin Hyok. In December 2017, the White House publicly attributed WannaCry to North Korea. The UK's National Cybersecurity Centre agreed. Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and Japan issued joint statements condemning the attack. Thomas Bossert, Trump's Homeland Security advisor, didn't mince words during the press conference. North Korea has acted especially badly, largely unchecked, for more than a decade. We believe they are directly responsible. September 2018, Federal Court, Los Angeles. The FBI indictment was remarkably detailed. It named Park Jin Hyok explicitly and outlined his entire criminal history. The Sony hack, the Bangladesh bank heist, WannaCry, and several other operations nobody had publicly connected to Lazarus before. The indictment included photographs, grainy surveillance images from Dalian. It listed his aliases, email addresses, and the front companies he'd worked for. It described his role in each operation with technical precision. The charges: conspiracy to commit computer fraud, wire fraud, causing damage to protected computers, and attempted access to a protected computer. If convicted, Park faced decades in federal prison. But the indictment was symbolic. Park was in China, beyond the reach of US law enforcement. North Korea would never extradite him. China wouldn't either. He was untouchable. Still, the message was clear. We know who you are. We know what you did. And we will never stop hunting you. The Treasury Department added Park to its sanctions list. His assets, if he had any outside North Korea, were frozen. US citizens were forbidden from doing business with him. His name appeared on watch lists at every border crossing in the Western world. (2019). Somewhere in China. Park Jin Hyok disappeared from public view after the indictment. Intelligence agencies believe he's still operating, still writing code for Lazarus, still taking orders from Pyongyang. His name sits on the FBI's Cyber Most Wanted list alongside hackers from Russia, Iran, and China. Lazarus Group continues its operations, new attacks, new targets, new techniques. In 2019, they targeted cryptocurrency exchanges. In 2021, they tried to steal COVID-19 vaccine research from pharmaceutical companies. In 2022, they laundered $625 million in cryptocurrency stolen from the Ronin network, a blockchain used by the game Axie Infinity. The pattern is always the same: sophisticated reconnaissance, patient infiltration, massive theft, quick disappearance. North Korea uses the stolen money to fund its nuclear program, bypass international sanctions, and keep the regime alive. But WannaCry changed something fundamental. It proved that cyber weapons could spiral beyond anyone's control. That malware designed for espionage or targeted attacks could become a global crisis. That a single programmer in a hotel room could accidentally shut down hospitals, railways, and governments across the world. Microsoft's president, Brad Smith, wrote an op-ed calling WannaCry an emerging pattern and comparing NSA exploits to stolen Tomahawk missiles. He argued that governments hoarding vulnerabilities made everyone less safe, not more. Cybersecurity experts debated whether intelligence agencies should disclose vulnerabilities to software companies or keep them for offensive operations. The vulnerabilities equities process, the US government's internal system for deciding whether to disclose or weaponize software flaws, came under intense scrutiny. Congress held hearings. The NSA defended its practices but admitted that stolen tools had been used against America's own allies. The shadow brokers were never identified or caught. WannaCry became a case study in every cybersecurity program worldwide, not because it was sophisticated, it wasn't, but because it proved that crude weapons combined with powerful exploits could cause unprecedented damage. The failsafe became legendary. Security researchers praised Park's decision to include it, even if he'd done so accidentally or as a debugging tool. That single line of code checking, if a random domain existed, WannaCry from spreading indefinitely. Some analysts speculated that Park had embedded the failsafe deliberately, knowing the weapon was too dangerous. Others argued it was standard anti-analysis technique that happened to work as a safety valve. Park never clarified. He never spoke publicly. He simply vanished. The truth. Park Jin Hyok didn't set out to hurt anyone. He wasn't a terrorist or an extremist. He was a programmer who wrote code because his government ordered him to. He embedded a failsafe because some part of him knew the monster might get loose. He was right. On May 12, 2017, one man's code stopped the world. Hospitals went dark. Trains stopped running. Factories shut down. Governments scrambled. All because a programmer in China pressed enter on a laptop keyboard. The final toll: 200,000 infected systems. 150 countries were affected. $4 billion in economic damage. Countless surgeries canceled. Countless patients turned away. Countless files lost forever. And Park? He's still out there. Still writing code. Still following orders from a regime that sees cyberspace as just another battlefield. Still waiting for the next assignment. Because in the digital age, wars aren't fought with tanks and missiles. They're fought with code. Written in the dark, released into the light, left to spread like wildfire. Park built the monster, but the monster was bigger than anyone imagined. And somewhere in China, in a small apartment near the coast, the man who created it sits in front of a laptop, waiting for his encrypted phone to buzz with new orders. The monster may be sleeping, but it never truly fades.